The battle is over. The screaming has stopped. But for one man, lying face down in the mud, sword arm gone, lungs filling slowly with blood. The war has just begun. Rome built triumphal arches for its generals. It carved gods into marble for its victories. But for the soldier left bleeding in the dirt, Rome built nothing. This is not a story about glory. This is a story about what glory costs, and who pays the price when the cheering stops. Picture the Roman legionary at his peak, disciplined, feared, unstoppable. He marched 50,000 steps in full armor without complaint. He built fortresses before breakfast and fought wars before sunset. For 20 years, sometimes 25, he gave Rome everything: his youth, his health, his mind. And Rome took it all. But when that same soldier came home with one eye, one arm, or a 1,000-yard stare that never quite focused again, suddenly the empire that had used him so perfectly had very little left to offer. These men were the invisible backbone of the greatest military force the ancient world ever knew. And history, Rome's own history, mostly forgot them, until now. To understand what happened after the battle, you first need to understand what happened during it. Roman warfare was not distant. There were no catapults launched from safety, no arrows fired from hilltops while soldiers sipped wine below. Roman warfare was intimate. It was the gladius, a short, stabbing sword, driving precisely into a man's ribs. It was the sensation of warm blood on your forearm. It was looking into another man's eyes as the life left them, and knowing tomorrow it could be yours. The gladius was silent and efficient, a tool of repetitive death, but when it didn't kill instantly, it left wounds that became their own slow sentence. Roman military physician Aulus Cornelius Celsus, in his landmark text De Medicina, documented injuries that read less like battlefield reports and more like nightmares. Exposed entrails, multiple fractures, faces unrecognizable, teeth shattered into jaws. And that was before you faced Germanic tribes. Their axes didn't cut cleanly, they tore. Their maces didn't puncture, they crushed. Ain't many soldiers who survived the battle died 3 days later, not from steel, from silence, from fever, from the slow black rot creeping up a forgotten limb in a tent no one visited. Imagine surviving that. The battle ends. Someone drags you off the field. If you're lucky, you're loaded onto a cart. No cushions, no suspension, just wood, stone roads, and every cobblestone hitting your open wound like a second blade. You arrive at the valetudinarium, the legionary field hospital. It smells of vinegar, smoke, and something else. Something you don't want to name. The medici, Roman military physicians, move between wooden beds with bronze instruments and expressions carved from stone. They don't comfort, they assess. Can this man fight again? Then save him. Can he not? Then manage it. Pain relief was wine, if available. Sometimes extracts of mandrake or willow bark. But for serious wounds, there were no miracles, only fire and iron. Cauterization with a red-hot bar pressed directly against torn flesh to stop the bleeding. The smell. Burned skin and singed hair. The sound. A sound that doesn't leave you. And if gangrene had set in, if the wound had blackened, if the foul odor had already announced what was coming, amputation, a bronze saw, iron hooks, crude forceps. The screams, according to historical records, were heard throughout the entire camp. The medici weren't healers in the tender sense. They were emergency surgeons in an age when every cut was a death sentence waiting to be confirmed. They decided who lived, who lost a limb, and who would not see the next sunrise. And they made those decisions quickly, because the legion had to keep moving. For those who survived the table, and many did not, the real enemy had already entered through the wound, gangrene, without antibiotics, without any understanding of bacteria, without sterile instruments, because those instruments had just been used on the man before you, and the man before him. A simple puncture wound could become a source of spreading necrosis within days. The tissue blackened at the edges. The smell arrived before the fever. And the fever, when it came, brought delirium. Soldiers crying out in languages no one recognized, calling names no one in the tent knew. Galen, perhaps the greatest physician of the ancient world, wrote plainly, many times, the only possible decision was complete amputation, but even amputation without proper hygiene could lead to septicemia, a full-body infection that killed just as surely as any barbarian blade, only slower and less mercifully. Herbal compresses of elder, rue and garlic were applied. Sometimes they reduced inflammation. Sometimes they simply delayed the inevitable. The battle against gangrene had no audience, no glory, no monument. It was fought in silence, on wooden beds, by men who had already given everything, now fighting not an enemy they could see, but one that lived inside them. But here is the wound Rome truly could not treat. Some soldiers came back whole, no missing limbs, no visible scars. Flesh intact, blood still running, and yet, something inside them had shattered. What we now call post-traumatic stress disorder already walked the streets of ancient Rome. It simply had no name, no diagnosis, and worst of all, no compassion. These men couldn't sleep. They woke screaming from dreams they refused to describe. They flinched at sounds that reminded them of steel. They drank until the images blurred. They disappeared from their families, present in body, absent in everything that mattered. Tacitus, in his Annals, writes of veterans from the Germanic campaigns who rejected the company of their fellow citizens, who avoided celebrations, who shunned human contact entirely, who refused to speak of the wars as though the mere act of remembering was unbearable. Rome's response to this: weakness. A man of virtue, Rome said, endures everything with dignity. To feel too much was suspicious. To suffer visibly was shameful. The culture that built the Colosseum, that turned death into entertainment, had no vocabulary for a soldier who simply could not stop remembering what he had done. They were alive, but a part of them had died on the battlefield, and Rome never went back to retrieve it. Those who survived, body and mind both, still faced one final battle. What now? Rome made promises to its soldiers, grand ones. Legionaries who completed 20 to 25 years of full service received the missio honesta, an honorable discharge. Land, a pension, sometimes citizenship. It was the reward for decades of blood and loyalty. But the severely wounded rarely made it that far. Most received instead the missio causaria, a medical discharge, symbolically honorable, practically devastating. No guaranteed land, no full pension, no safety net. Just a dismissal note and a long walk home. Some found purpose in reassignment, becoming camp scribes, supply managers, instructors training the next generation of men who would replace them. Under emperors like Trajan or Hadrian, pragmatic men who understood the value of experience, this was common, but under others, the opportunities evaporated. And for those discharged in disgrace, those branded with the missio ignominiosa for cowardice or indiscipline, the fate was darker still. Their names were erased from records, their rights revoked, their families sometimes turned them away. There are inscriptions found along Hadrian's wall in Britain that document men, wounded men, who carried that brand of shame to their graves. The veterans who had no land, no pension, no family willing to receive them. They ended up in the streets of Rome, Alexandria, Carthage, former soldiers of the most powerful army in human history, begging in the shadows of the very temples their blood had built. Some found darker paths, mercenary work, gladiatorial schools. Men like Spiculus, a famous gladiator of Nero's era, possibly of military origin, learned to monetize what the army had made of them. Violence became profession once again, this time for applause instead of empire. The Rome that cast warriors in marble sold their suffering as entertainment for the masses. Augustus saw the crisis. He created the aerarium militare, a military pension fund, financed by taxation, meant to guarantee retirement for Rome's veterans. For a time, it worked. Under Vespasian, it was reinforced. Under Nero, was raided for palace luxuries. The fund outlasted some of its soldiers. The soldiers outlasted none of its promises. And 2,000 years later, we recognize these wounds by their proper names. PTSD, traumatic amputation, septic shock, systemic abandonment of veterans. We have institutions, research, support systems, and yet the headlines still find us. Veterans sleeping on streets. Soldiers returning from wars to find a society that has already moved on. The specific vocabulary has changed. The fundamental betrayal has not. Rome knew how to forge a soldier. It did not know, or perhaps did not want, to carry one home. The question Rome never answered, and that we are still answering today, is this: what do we owe the people we send to bleed for us? Not the generals, not the statues, the man in the mud, the one who came back different. What do we owe him? Before tanks came legions, before legions came men, and behind every marching column, every raised shield, every shining triumph, there was someone limping home alone. No arch built for him, no coin struck in his likeness, no historian writing down his name, just a man, scarred, forgotten, still fighting a war no one else could see. Rome conquered the world, but it left some of its greatest soldiers behind, not on foreign soil, but in its own streets. If this story moved you, if the forgotten soldier deserves to be remembered, leave a like and subscribe so that more voices from the past may finally be heard. And tell us in the comments, do you think Rome truly owed more to its soldiers? Because this channel exists for them, for the ones history almost lost. May Mars guide you in battle, and may history never be forgotten.